Oh, here we go. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. If you have any issues hearing me, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll get started here. Um, I always like to start out with the mission plan. This is the central hub of our platform. It's intended to just cut to the chase, if you will. So for all of your tenants, we populate everything up. This is your tenant selector over here. When you're on the root level, all the tenants, all the alerts from all the tenants bubble up to here. So what you probably want to do is actually select a given tenant and take a look at the issues for a given tenant. But if you want the whole view, you can go up to root. What we like to do in order to do a cybersecurity risk assessment for a prospect, typically what we have found is many prospects don't necessarily want to allow you to install software. So we highly recommend using the ThreatMate Pi as an alternative to being able to install software. Oftentimes they don't want to give you admin or root privileges as well. So the ThreatMate Pi is really designed for this use case where you can, with permission, put the Pi on the network, plug it in, and configure it. And once it's set up to report to a tenant, which I'll show you how to set up a tenant here, you go under administration, tenants, add tenant, add in the name of the new tenant. At that point, you would use the QR code on that ThreatMate Pi and assign it to this particular tenant that you've created. And that device will show up under configuration and agent hardware. So you would add agent hardware, you would add the hardware identifier from that ThreatMate Pi over here, and it will then show up in this table over here. If you do have any other agents, they do show up here on this table, and you will notice you can turn on and off the scanning capability. So if you have a ThreatMate Pi, you would want to enable the pentest and the vulnerability scan on that prospect's network. Once you do that, that will kick off a scan. It'll also kick off a pen test. We recommend waiting about a day, 24 hours. And then once you've let that run, you would go back to the mission plan and look and go back to the mission plan, select that tenant, and look at what issues may have arisen from that tenant. So I will pause here for a second, see if there are any questions so far. Let's see. Doesn't look like it. If you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. And this call is being recorded, so you can always go back to it later. So we covered the tenancy. We did cover how to set up an agent. We also covered how to set up a tenant. The other thing that we'd like to also set up is the external scan. So under configuration, you would go under external scans, and for a given tenant, so for example, if you were to choose Dark Industries, you would go ahead, click external domains, and here you would add their domain name, right? So, and they might have multiple domains, but it could be starkindustries.com. You would go ahead, click add. It would then add it to this table in any number of domains that might be affiliated with that tenant. You can also add any external IPs. Most firewalls don't have an associated domain name, so you do want to be able to add an external IP address here. And that will again schedule a vulnerability scan and a pen test of that firewall device. That's super important. For domains, we do require verification in order to schedule the external pen test. The way that you would do that is add this text record to the DNS record for that domain. Once you do that, it will show up as verified, and it will then schedule. It will then schedule an automated pen test against that domain. We will also enumerate all subdomains associated with that top level domain. So you can take a look at these. If there are any that you don't want scanned, just go ahead and click the disable. If there are any that you know of that we didn't find, you can go ahead and click add subdomain, and that will then go ahead and add that subdomain to be scanned as well. So that's setting up the external scan. So again, you can do that for a prospect, is do the external scan. Also behind the firewall scan with the ThreatMate Pi. Another important capability, let's see here, is domain security. So we will automatically, for each domain that we find, is check the SPF and DMARC records to see if there's anything missing or anything awry with the configuration of those records. And if there is, we'll point it out, right? So here you have a missing DMARC record, and that's definitely going to show up as an alert to fix that. So that more or less addresses all the external scan stuff. That's how you set it up. We're still doing the configuration. If for a prospect, if they are willing to let you also integrate with their Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, you get a ton more information. Again, this would require their permission. If you have their permission, I'm just going to go ahead and select the root tenant here. If you have their permission, you would go ahead and click add integration, and it will then take you to Microsoft 365, from which that prospect would then log in with their global admin credentials to do an integration. And with that, we will download all the users associated with that tenant, that Microsoft 365. And also we'll be able to look and see if there are any issues we find with those accounts. So the first thing we'll tell you about is the privilege of a given user. So here you see there's some global admins on here. In addition, we'll tell you the MFA status for those users. So here you've got a global admin that does not have 2FA enabled. So that's definitely a problem. And we point that out. And there's a second here as well. This is a demo account, so no fears. We'll give you other information too, when the account was created, the last login time, that's very important to check on. The last time the password was changed. So again, if you've got a password policy, you can alert on whether that password change has not been done within the time period required by your policy. Here for 2FA, we'll also show you what their second factor is as well. So very helpful information on the account side. This will help if you get this right. If there are no issues, this will help you prevent account takeovers, which is really one of the most significant attacks against Microsoft 365. Aside from account takeovers, another significant attack surface are these third-party SaaS apps getting users to click on links that then give permission to install a third-party app. All right, so we will show you all the third-party apps that are integrated with the Microsoft 365 instance, who actually did that integration. So you want to see if you have non-global admins here, which you can check up top. And then the number of permissions, and you can also see what permissions were granted to that third-party app. So if you want to do some investigation of third-party apps that you're not familiar with, and we only have 10 here, many tenants will have 30, 40, 50, right? So you can look at the permissions, who installed them. Obviously that user has been deprecated, you might want to consider removing that third-party app, or if you're not, if it doesn't serve a business function, that's another good reason too. So this is a significant attack surface, the Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. We do support both. Once you've covered that, you now have external. We showed you behind the firewall how to get you set up with the ThreatMate Pi. If you do get the Microsoft 365 integration, that will also feed a lot more into your risk assessment. Any issues that come up get funneled up here. And this is where a lot of the magic happens, in the sense that we will point you to issues that you need to actually address, and not necessarily all of the issues, right? So we use what's called a severity score. The severity score is a product of both the EPSS score and the severity, and that will give you the severity score. So let's see here. Here are some examples. Microsoft Windows Server 2012, and we'll show you the asset where this operating system is running. And you can see there's obviously a lot of alerts associated with this old version of 2012. And if you care, we will give you more information about the specific vulnerability, as well as the CVE details as well. Obviously, this is a very high critical alert, so we do think that's important. But it's not just the operating systems. We'll also look at authentication issues. We talked about Microsoft, and here again is one that needs addressing. There's also Google. We will take a look at compliance issues that we find, like a TLS certificate expired. These are all security exposures that are important to be able to address. So here you've got various issues from a compliance standpoint. This one, I think, is a big one, insecure FTP that was found. Self-sign cert, is that a big deal? Maybe not. Many HTTPs simply reference an HTTPS, so really not a big deal. Another big thing that we'll run is a pen test, an automated pen test. Here you can see that we've got some highs. Anytime you see a high alert on a pen test, that means we were able to successfully penetrate that device. Here you got an SMB brute force attack, which means we're able to log on via brute force password guessing. This one is anonymous logins were supported on this SMB. Most likely, this is a network attached storage device, which allowed anyone to log in. And of course, you don't want that, because from a ransomware perspective, that's exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for those on-site backup storage, and they will log in and they will encrypt, right? So you want to be able to identify these. There is the ability, if you know about an issue and you have some other mitigation, you can acknowledge all and have an end date where you say, okay, bring it back up. Give a reason for why you're acknowledging that, and go ahead and acknowledge it. You can also enter in notes. So again, this is the pen testing is super important to take a look at. All of these issues really are intended to say, in this order of severity, please do your work as far as IT goes, because you will really affect the risk and the security score, right? So we do have a multi-tenant score. If you're looking across all of your tenants, is a good way to see where, which tenant has the most amount of pain. This is generated at the time of when you click on this. Same thing with the ThreatMate score. The ThreatMate score is that score from 0 to 100 for a given tenant. And so let's see, for Stark Industries, you can see we've got a 50. It does generate this real time, and where the points belong, right? So you can dig into that. The real meat, though, is in the PDF reports. So the PDF reports gives detailed, if you click any of these, it'll generate a detailed network pen test, a detailed network vulnerability discovery report. These are pretty beefy. So more appropriate for audit level. If you want to just update your clients, you would go to the executive report. We give the overall score, which is really what most clients that you're interfacing care about is how am I doing overall? And if we jump up to root, it'll take a little bit of time to generate this, but it gives you a good report overall of how you're doing. And let's see here. I think I have to go back and regenerate that. I'll just use Stark Industries. So you can see from the external side, it will go ahead and tell you where any issues are, if there are any material issues. Behind the firewall will also generate an issue. And we will, in every section, external, internal, which is behind the firewall, and cloud, anywhere where we find an attack surface, we will go ahead and populate a report, which then generates a PDF over here. This will generate a PDF, and that becomes a nice cybersecurity risk report that you can hand a customer. We'll also white label it so you can go ahead and enter your brand on that report and hand it to a client. This report that you generate for a prospect can be pretty beefy, especially if you include the pen test, the vulnerability discovery behind the firewall. If you can get access to the Microsoft 365, it's going to show a lot more. We typically see our MSP partners charging at the low end 1,500, the high end 3,000 US dollars for these reports for a prospect. And when you hand them that report, you're actually giving them a meaningful report on what their security exposure is, but more importantly, what can they do about this? And the what can you do about this will essentially be your project plan for that prospect that then becomes a client. And it allows you to do a fair amount of work, project work, to clean it up, get that score up from a 50 to a 75. And once it's cleaned up, at that point, your monthly reports are updates on any new exposures that you found that and fix, or ongoing work to get them up to par. So with that, I know it was pretty quick, but it is actually pretty straightforward to use the platform. I will pause and see if there are any questions from the group here. All right, do you check what the protection level is? Is this a compliance question? Not really familiar what you mean by protection level. Oh, DMARC and DKM. We do give very detailed analysis of what is going on in DKIM. I do not know the answer to the question, do you show what protection level is? So we can get back to you, Carl, on that one in particular. Within our DMARC report over here, you will see fairly fine-grained, this is under beta. We're adding some more capabilities here before we move it out of beta. But basically, we will look at every domain that's gone through DMARC for a particular domain, and be able to tell you, did the DMARC pass or fail? What policy was evaluated? And the result from that. So I don't see a protection level there, so maybe the answer is no. Okay, none. Okay, there you go. So yeah, that is in the beta sections under DMARC report. I know they're adding more capability here before moving into production, but it is fairly mature. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you for attending. This recording will be available. I'm glad to send it by email if you like. Just reach out to info@threatmate.com and we will get back to you.